Good stuff happening in the NBA this week, where it is NBA Rivals Week. For the Denver Nuggets, though, they're playing some interesting teams because on first glance, you wouldn't say to yourself, the Sacramento Kings are the Denver Nuggets rival, or maybe even the Philadelphia 76ers. So I shouted it out to the masses and used my platform, as some say, to figure out in our community who people think the Denver Nuggets rival is. Now, I got the answers I more or less expected. I didn't get a lot of explanations, but I can draw two and two together and figure out some of the explanations myself. I did a lot of research on this one. I love sports history. That's been one of my passions since I was a kid. I love the personal side of sports as much as I do numbers deep dives on this podcast. I hope to do more personal storytelling and stuff about the culture of teams and the fan bases surrounding them. And this is one of those issues. So as I look at NBA Rivals Week, I thought to myself, who's the Nuggets rival? Well, for some teams, it's a very simple answer, right? Tonight, Thursday night, the Boston Celtics and Los Angeles Lakers are playing each other. It's the NBA's premier rivalry. Last night, the Sacramento Kings played the Golden State Warriors. Maybe not a premier rivalry, but certainly a geographic rival. The two are very close to each other. They've had many playoff battles, especially recently, that come to mind. And, it seems iconic in a way. It's like a little brother, big brother thing, but not necessarily in like the bad CSU way that CU always beats up on CSU. Like the little brother has a shot. And with the CSU example, I think CU fans would say Nebraska's their rival, right? And I think CSU fans would first say that Wyoming's their rival. So in college, there's primary rivals, secondary rivals, even sometimes tertiary rivals, right? I think in pro sports, very few teams have primary and secondary rivals. I think the NFL lends itself to rivalries the way the schedule works. Like everyone thinks of the Raiders as the Broncos' rival. Secondarily, maybe the Chiefs right now, although Chiefs fans feel like they've surpassed the Broncos, even though the Broncos dominated the Chiefs for a long time. So there's some real bad blood there. The whole NFC East, Cowboys playing anybody, Giants, Commanders, Eagles, they all kind of intertwine, right? And then for like a team like Philadelphia, they've also got the rivalry of being in the same state as Pittsburgh. Or for New York, crosstown of New York. Chicago Cubs with the St. Louis Cardinals, they also have the Chicago White Sox as a rivalry. So sometimes these rivalries, I think, are very naturally occurring. Even in the case of the Cubs that I just mentioned, where Cubs fans and St. Louis Cardinals fans would say their primary rival is each other, and Cubs fans would say their secondary rival is the White Sox, but the White Sox would say their primary rival is the Cubs, it still works. Like that one still kind of works. The Denver Nuggets, though, the fans aren't even in agreement in who the primary rival of the Nuggets is, which makes for an interesting conversation of, let alone primary, secondary, tertiary. I don't even know where to start, right? I think the easiest place to just start is just say, all right, take the eastern side of the NBA. No one in the East is the Nuggets rival. I don't think anyone out here is claiming the Chicago Bulls, the Charlotte Hornets, or the New Jersey Nets as the Nuggets rival, although they did play in an ABA Finals. Similarly, I don't think anyone's claiming the Miami Heat as the Nuggets rival. So we can knock out half the board there. You can also look at geography, right? I mentioned some of those geography rivals. They're really easily built in. One of the things that always sticks out to me about Denver is how far Denver is from every other city. There's not another major city, and I'm sorry, Cheyenne, within a 6-hour drive of here. Albuquerque, Kansas City, Lincoln, Phoenix, a little bit further, and Salt Lake City. Really the closest, right, fellas, if we look any direction. So if you go to a city like Cleveland or Philadelphia, a 6-hour drive will get you to Detroit or Buffalo, New York, Boston, Washington, perhaps, Richmond, depending on where you are in the Eastern Seaboard. There's a lot of culture and a lot of different cities and styles and different industries that those cities are known for that develop those rivalries. In Denver, the brotherhood that we have with any other team the closest one might be the Utah Jazz because of the geography makeup of the NBA, right? Like that is the closest team to the Nuggets. And I don't know many Nuggets fans that have road tripped back and forth between Utah. I know some Buffs fans who have made that drive for football games. That's part of it, right? But I also think that if we're being real about it, the only culture we really share with Utah is that our states are both gorgeous. You know, some of the tourism economy is built on the same and the natural parks and the ski industry and stuff like that. But the industrial makeup of the economies of the state are completely different, let alone the culture and religious aspects of the state are completely different. They're two different states, two very different states. And not in necessarily the headbutting way of, you know, we're New York and we do everything different than Boston, or we're Los Angeles and we're about the glitz and the glamour and we do everything different than Boston, right? Like there's a weird amount of crossover with Utah and Colorado, but also not a lot of conflict per se. So it's really hard to consider the Jazz as a rival. And the other part about the Jazz thing that I always come back to is the Nuggets have only played them in a playoff series 5 different times. The Nuggets in those playoff series are 1-4. And realistically, you know, there was the one Melo playoff loss. And then if you go back into, I'm sorry, they're 2-3. My bad. If you go back into the mid 80s, the Jazz were on the come up with Stockton and Malone, but that thing hadn't really hit yet. So that wasn't really an important defining moment in franchise history. The one year I think that both teams felt like they had a legitimate shot at something special was the bubble in 2020, that 7-game series. And that's the notable moment in that franchise's history. And I almost feel like the rivalry that maybe existed there for a hot second with the Jazz, Nuggets have always struggled to play in Salt Lake City, has almost been taken to Minnesota with Rudy Gobert. It's felt almost like Rudy Gobert's rivalry so much as it's been the Jazz's rivalry. And the Donovan Mitchell thing, Jamal Murray thing, the head-to-head, that escaped because Donovan Mitchell got traded. So we lost that rivalry. That was never really one that continued. It was a hot one that fizzled out quickly. I feel very similar about the Phoenix Suns, right? The Nuggets had the Suns in 4 series that everyone wants to talk about in Phoenix still to this day. And that's the notable moment in the franchise's 2 clashes. They played in the playoffs 3 different times in the 80s as well. The Nuggets went 1-2 in those series. And then, you know, they met up in the last couple of years. They split those series. But those teams were radically different. We're talking about that Devin Booker, Cam Johnson, you know, Bridges, Ayton team compared to one that was now with Kevin Durant, right? It just was a different team by then almost. And it felt like a different situation. And though there was some real positive feelings about getting over that game, particularly on Christmas, and then getting through that rivalry, I don't think anyone's sitting here saying still that the Nuggets really feel like the Suns' rival. And I would make the case to this day that I think the Rockies' real rival is the Diamondbacks. Very similar franchises, stories, and, you know, they've met in the playoffs and they've been good at similar times and they've had some great players at similar positions. You know, the Booker Murray thing felt like it really might pop there for a second. It might be this like 10-year rivalry between Kentucky guards. Which team has the better one? But that kind of has already fizzled out. So I don't know that the Suns is the Nuggets rival. I'll come back to the Timberwolves in a second, but just specifically on Rudy Gobert on the Wolves, because the player rivalry thing is interesting. And if you look at NBA Rivals Week, clearly what the NBA was trying to do this week with the Nuggets was Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, an individual player-centric rivalry. You look at the way the culture and the fans have shifted and shaped the NBA the last 20 years, and there are Kobe fans, there are LeBron fans, there are Jordan fans, there are Durant fans, there are Steph Curry fans. Heck, there might even be more Kobe fans than there are fans of the Charlotte Hornets. Maybe that would have been a little bit differently if the trade history had worked out differently, for those who know. Point being, there's a real rivalry between Jokic and Embiid, or there was. And it felt like this year it no longer exists anymore because of what Embiid's gone through with his knee, and it just feels like they're at different points in their career now. Jokic proved it, Embiid never did. And I think people are getting to the point where they don't think Embiid ever will. But for a second there, it was who's the best center in the game. These two great centers in an age of guards have come back to the NBA and they're winning these awards. Giannis, Jokic, Embiid. I felt like for a second, Jokic, Giannis might be the new Magic Bird. But the Bucks have faded. And Jokic, Giannis has never had like a defining moment. Even Jokic in the Olympics have had that moment with Joel Embiid now, right? So clearly that's what the NBA was trying to do on Tuesday or Monday was a player-driven rivalry. Tuesday, I'm sorry. Thursday, tonight, the Nuggets play the Kings. Now, I don't think anyone's claiming the Kings as a rival. I don't think anyone in Denver has thought twice of the Kings. Not really. I don't think anyone in Sacramento has thought twice of the Nuggets. Like, no bad blood. I'm just saying, like, they're teams that have been rather irrelevant towards each other. But there is one person who thinks about the Kings a lot, and that's Michael Malone, who was fired by the Kings. And I don't think he's going to say anything spicy, perhaps, about the Kings this weekend or this week. But he did say when Mike Brown was fired, he talked about how ridiculous it was. And Michael Malone didn't wear purple or let his daughters wear purple for a long time. He had some real bad blood towards the Kings. Now, that's a personal feud. I wouldn't say that that's a rivalry, right? So we're crossing these teams off the board. That's what I'm doing, right? Process of elimination. But later this week, on Saturday afternoon, that Rudy Gobert rivalry rekindles. And it's when the Minnesota Timberwolves meet the Denver Nuggets. Now, the Timberwolves have historically been losers. The Nuggets have historically been losers until very recently here. The Timberwolves are much younger of a franchise than the Nuggets. They do not have a shared history. Timberwolves and Nuggets only met in the playoffs in 2003-04. The only time the Timberwolves had made a deep run. And that Nuggets team wasn't going anywhere, right? That was very, very young Melo. First time the Nuggets had made the playoffs in ages. They were just happy to be there. Didn't matter, right? It was kind of like the Broncos in the playoffs this year. It's like, there's the Josh Allen thing. I wish we would have had him. And, Von Miller, we're happy he's succeeding, and it sucks to lose in the playoffs. But I don't think anyone's really that upset that the Broncos lost to the Bills in the playoffs, right? We know the Bills are a better team. We know where the Broncos are right now. They're ascending. The Bills are there already, right? Timberwolves never reached that high of heights, right? They only got to the one conference finals, whereas the Bills and Josh Allen continue to go there. But point being, they're at different points. Similarly, I felt that about the 2022-2023 matchup between the Nuggets and Wolves. Though Tim Conley had taken over as the GM, and though they had made the playoffs a couple years in a row, they made some significant deals and reshaped that organization, and they felt like a serious team for the first time, and getting to the playoffs felt like an achievement. And I don't think Nuggets fans really cared about the Wolves, right? Like, Nuggets fans knew they were going to walk through that series. I don't think Minnesota people really felt that strongly about it. We have Anthony Edwards. We hope he proves something in this playoff series. We hope we find out that he's our guy. And they did. Right? Like, that's what that playoff series was about. Fast forward a year. The Timberwolves are the team that stops the Nuggets from repeating. And it's because of the moves Tim Conley made, who has a personal feud, obviously, with KSE, or a rivalry with KSE now, because of the way that ended after so many years working together. So the way this is now intertwining, in the way that came to an end, and how sour Denver is right now about Minnesota, I think that right now is the Nuggets' rival, at least this year. But historically speaking, the Timberwolves have not been the Nuggets' rival. If you want to look back at playoff history, it's clearly the Lakers who the Nuggets fans would say, we hate. That's the team we hate. And a lot of people hate LA, right? Like, the Nuggets fans are not alone in this. Part of this is when you have as successful of a franchise as the Los Angeles Lakers, they've simply ended a lot of team seasons. But the most successful seasons in Nuggets history always came an end by the Los Angeles Lakers. They always finished the Nuggets seasons. The Nuggets have met the Lakers in the playoffs 9 times. did not beat them in a playoff series until that championship run. Heck, I don't even think there was a deciding game played in any of those playoff series. I'm looking at it right now, and it was a game 3 in 78-79. That's as close as the Nuggets got in the first round. They won game 1 and then lost those the next 2. Dan Issel, sorry, horse. But I feel like, there is some sort of rivalry there, even though it's a big brother, little brother thing. And obviously, the Lakers' real rival is the Celtics. If you ask any Lakers fan, they're going to say the Celtics. And then they geographically might say, the Clippers are like our little brother. And then we've got this thing with the Warriors, NorCal, SoCal. They also had this thing with the Suns because they've been good at similar times. And there's a lot of people that live in, the two areas and they cross over. And, even the Lakers Jazz, they were good at similar times in the West. And the Lakers have a lot of people to hate, and I get it because they've been good for a long time. But they have reason to hate the Nuggets too now, and the Nuggets never gave them reason to hate. Now, last year when the Nuggets played the Lakers in the playoffs, I think that was just kind of like a parade of we're storming through them again, and this is going to be awesome. I don't think anyone was really scared of the Lakers. I don't think Lakers fans, except the crazy ones, really thought that they had a shot at that series. Felt like a death march, right? Go back 2 years ago. Put yourself in a Lakers fan perspective. I know it's awful, Nuggets fans, but put yourself here for a second. You have LeBron James. You just won the title a couple of years before. You reshaped the team. They've been awesome since the All-Star break, and they get through the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. You're playing the historic loser Nuggets. And on the other side of the bracket, the Celtics are there. You think the Celtics are probably going to win the playoff series, and they seem like an absolute beast. But if the Heat win that series, you got to feel pretty good about your odds, right? Heat do win that series. So, while the Nuggets did sweep the Lakers, legitimately saying this, the Nuggets probably ended LeBron's last real shot at winning a title. Because if LeBron gets through that series, I think they're beating the Heat again. And then the LeBron Heat thing is a real rivalry, right? I think LeBron's rivals over time, if you look at it, and I wrote down a whole list because, again, I did some real research on this. At the start, it was definitely Boston, right? And that even trickled over to the Miami days. Is he had a real thing going with Boston, and he couldn't get through Boston. He goes to Miami, and then he is getting through Boston, and Boston hates him as much as he hates Boston. It felt like they played the Pacers in the playoffs every single year, the Cavs, or then later the Heat, LeBron did. He had a thing with Chicago there for a brief second with Derrick Rose in his MVP season. Dallas, but that was more of a D-Wade thing, right? D-Wade, Dirk was a bigger rivalry than LeBron ever had with those guys. The Spurs versus LeBron, some great finals, but I don't know if that was ever really a rivalry. And then there was the LeBron-Steph stuff, and the Warriors-LeBron rivalry was real with Steph, right? It was LeBron-Steph, who is the face of the league, who is the icon of this decade. But ever since then, I think it's been Jokic. I think Jokic has really been LeBron's rival. Like a lot of LeBron's greatness has come to a head with Jokic's. And I know LeBron's at a different point in his career and has been the entire time Jokic has been in his prime, but LeBron's still the face of the league. He still is. And this thing's ending because of Jokic. He prevented LeBron from winning a title. And again, you might be putting too much credence into a conference final, but if you had asked any Nuggets fan before 2022, 2023, before they won the title, if you asked any Nuggets fan, when was the closest the Nuggets came to winning the title? In consensus, they would say 2008, 2009, Nuggets are tied 2-2 with the Lakers. And on the other side of the bracket, the Orlando Magic have won. The Orlando Magic have pulled an upset, and we don't think that Magic team is any good. I agree. I think the Nuggets may have won the title that year had they gotten through that Lakers team. But that was Kobe at his peak. That was Paul Gasol. That was a really good team, right? Everything changes in Nuggets history if they get through that. So that's that pain thing, right? I think there's got to be pain caused on both sides. The Nuggets play the Lakers in the playoffs again, which, by the way, they're the 4-5 right now. I love the Nuggets odds in that series again. The Lakers have not been able to beat the Nuggets. The Nuggets clearly have had their number for a while now, right? Then all of a sudden, that playoff number, it's 10 meetings and the Nuggets have won 3. And they've won the last 3. And depending on the amount of games they've won, they perhaps have won like 20 out of 22 games or something like that. Just ballparking it. So historically speaking, while right now the Nuggets might feel like they're a little bit more hurt by the Wolves and they want to get back at the Wolves, if the Nuggets run into the Lakers this year again, the LeBron-Jokic rivalry will be talked about in the future. Again, going back to that Olympic game, LeBron had a triple-double in that game. They've had some great moments against each other, iconic moments. Going back to Jokic saying in like 2017, it's a mismatch for us when I'm on LeBron. It's good for us. So that's incredible that the Nuggets might actually be great enough in this era to develop a real rivalry with the Lakers, that they've put themselves on that pedestal. Because I do think there's a legitimate two-way street thing to a rivalry. And the fact that the Nuggets can claim a two-way street perhaps with the Lakers would be important. And again, a lot of this comes back to famous matchups and famed moments and the iconic moments the Nuggets had against the Lakers in that series, the iconic moments of the bubble, the inbounds passes in 08, 09, and Kobe and Melo. Like, that might be the best candidate. But I'm going to offer you another one. And similar to the Lakers, this team's absolutely owned the Nuggets in the playoffs, including going back to the ABA where they won a tiebreaker game. But the Spurs and Nuggets have met in the playoffs 7 times. The Nuggets have won 2 of those series, 18-19, and then if you go back to 84-85 when the Nuggets lost to the Lakers, Alex English's best team. So, looking at the Nuggets Spurs, cultural clash, 2 completely different cities, even though they have like a shared thing with the rodeo and like West, right? 2 shared histories, both born in the ABA, founding franchises, come over as 2 of the 4 teams, right? Both really good and crossing over in eras. Like Jokic catches the end of, the Kawhi, Duncan stuff. Melo catches the tail end of the first Spurs stuff and the early beginnings of the next Spurs stuff. Alex English going against those Spurs teams in the 80s. Both of the teams were the iconic teams of the ABA, outside of Kentucky and Indianapolis and New Jersey, St. Louis. Shout out Utah Stars. So I think there's like a legitimate case to be made that the Spurs historically are as good of a rival as any. Like they would tell you, I think their rival is like Houston and Dallas. It's like the Texas thing, right? I also think the Spurs fans would tell you that the Lakers are their rivals, and then they've got that thing with the Heat. But they're also one that, like, in my mind at least, they don't have like a clear-cut rival. And if you want to project the next few years, and I'm sitting here talking about this as Wemby is playing in Paris right now, Wemby is clearly being billed as the face of the league in the future. And he deserves it. He's going to be awesome. That Jokic Wemby game was already iconic from like a week ago, 2 weeks ago, whenever that was. France, Serbia are going to have some matchups here. They've already had a couple. And I think the Nuggets and Spurs are going to run into each other quite a bit here in the back half of Jokic's career, early parts of Wemby's career. So just as LeBron may have passed the torch to Jokic in some way, because Steph Curry refused to take the torch, the eventual guy Jokic might pass the torch to is Wemby. Maybe. So that's something to look out for. I think that Spurs thing has potential. You guys, a lot of the answers, I'm just going through them. It's Wolves, it's Lakers, it's Jazz, Lakers, Minnesota, San Antonio, Jazz, Wolves, Mavericks. Blazers is one I didn't mention. There was a brief run-in with the Blazers there. One of the reasons why the Nuggets got KCP was for Damian Lillard, and then that team fell apart. Yeah, I mean, like those were some awesome playoff series for hot second there. But again, I think that burned hot, and it's more in that Suns, hopefully, where this Timberwolves bucket is going. Because if the Nuggets lose to the Timberwolves in the playoffs again, Yeah, that won't be good. If the Timberwolves lose the Nuggets in the playoffs this year, I think it'll be written off because this Timberwolves season is kind of turning into a disaster. 2 years from now, if they run into each other again, when things might improve in Minnesota, I don't know. But that thing has potential. I'm with you guys on the people who say Wolves. And again, that's the team that right now definitely has the Nuggets fans feeling pain the most. We've got some funny ones. The Carmelo Anthony's the Nuggets rival, the second apron, CJ McCollum, who designed the second apron. This person says, Nuggets Nation on Blue Sky, 1 Lakers, 2 Suns, 3 Warriors. Warriors, again, not a team I mentioned. One that, felt like almost like a building block, an achieving block for the Nuggets to finally get past the Warriors almost the same way that the Bulls got past the Pistons in the 90s and the 80s, right? I don't know that there's a real rivalry there between those two teams. I think it's pretty mutual respect. There is maybe a little bit of bad blood, but from my mind, it's not. It doesn't have the buildup that you can to make you feel pain that the Lakers do from the Nuggets side. And I think Warriors fans, they don't really care about the Nuggets much. Utah, Spurs, Thunder is someone projecting that they say the Spurs and the Thunder are going to be the rivals the next 10 years. I think the Thunder has potential. There's been some shared history between the two teams. There was a playoff series between the two. Melo got knocked out by, Durant and Westbrook. Westbrook had his big moment. And if Westbrook beats the Thunder in a playoff series this year when the Thunder are having their best season ever and it's the franchise icon, I think there's something to that, right? Like that's real. Like it felt extra when the Nuggets beat the Blazers in that playoff series when they had Melo. That was fun. It felt special when the Nuggets were beating up on the Lakers when they had Melo. Like that was fun. Yeah, and then this person just says, other than Chase Albright on Blue Sky, Boston, LA, LAC, New York, does anyone care about these franchises and these rivalries? To me, the rivalries are more like LeBron versus Toronto, Russ versus KD, Steph versus LeBron, Bill versus Wilt, Magic versus Bird. And then to that point, I would ask you, is it Nikola versus Joel? Is it Nikola versus Jokic? I mean, Nikola versus LeBron? Yeah, so it's like, even if you go with the player thing, I don't know who that rivalry is per se right now with the Nuggets. If you'd asked me a year ago, I'd definitely say Nicole Joel, but I think there's a better case maybe to be made for LeBron versus Jokic, which is a pretty cool thing to be saying, again, that we're part of this iconic basketball player's story on both sides. I think it's almost honorable. I mean, these guys maybe both 2 of the top 10 players of all time. Obviously, LeBron top 5, Jokic knocking on the door of top 10. I don't know. I'm just saying it out right now. Brandon Blaine on Blue Sky. 80s were the Jazz. 90s, too bad to have one. Very real for that. 2000s were the Lakers. 2010s, Utah. 2020s, Mini. And I like that breakdown. I think we're too early into the 2020s to really know how that's going to develop. But that's kind of where I'm at. If you ask me today who the Nuggets rival is, I would say currently, as of this season, the Minnesota Timberwolves is the team the Nuggets feel like they've got to get over. Historically, even though I'm a big two-way street guy, if the Nuggets play the Lakers in the playoffs, like it's looking like they will right now, and the Nuggets beat them in the playoffs, I think it's officially a two-way street between the Nuggets and the Lakers. And the LeBron thing might have failed because of, Nikola Jokic's Nuggets, because he only won 1 title there in LA. Anyway, make sure you are commenting, liking, and subscribing on YouTube. I would love to see your comments on who you think the Nuggets rival is. Like, I spent hours reading this stuff the other night during the Philadelphia game because it was so boring. Game got boring in the fourth quarter. Yeah, I'm really excited to hear. I'm excited to see the game, the Nuggets versus the Kings tonight. The Kings are playing better basketball, so we'll see how that goes for the Nuggets. I'll be talking about that on Tuesday, as well as the Nuggets' little road excursion where they're going to play Minnesota in Chicago before I talk to you next. The big game next week is New York on Wednesday, and then they're Philadelphia on Friday. Again, don't know if Joel Embiid's playing, so who cares if he's not. But yeah, I'm really excited to see how the Nuggets maybe get back at the Knicks next week, because that was a disaster here at home. Anyway, long edition of the Mile High Hoops podcast. Hope you enjoyed talking ball with me. I'm Jake Shapiro. You can catch me on all my social media platforms. They're really easy to find. And make sure you are liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel and reading our stuff on denversports.com, where I'll be writing about tonight's Nuggets Kings game. Talk to you soon.